Top 10 sci-fi novels. I, of course, have some honorable mentions. Top honorable mention is Rendezvous with Ramada by Arthur C. Clarke. I haven't read it, but I've heard a lot of things, so it's next on my list. And the other one could be considered horror, but I want to get it as an honorable mention, which is The
Enough
Fireman.
with your honorable mentions. Jeez.
I have two. You had like 50. I have two. One I haven't read
God.
and one that might not fit in the category. But The Fireman by Joe Hill was an excellent book, a dystopian future where it's not zombies dystopian, it's sort of like people blowing up. But let me move on to the
Okay.
real list before you jackasses try to interrupt me. Number 10 would be Tachyon Web by Christopher Pike. This is a personal preference. No one probably ever heard of it. It's probably his only sci-fi book
I've heard of
since.
it because I've been hanging out with you for like a decade and a half. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
it was a good book, but not known by many other. Next one is actually a zombie trilogy. The first book was excellent. Feed by Mira Grant, which is sort of
Hmm.
a futuristic where zombies, sort of like a T virus, but they explain it differently. Next one might sound familiar, but I don't know how many of you guys read it. The Foundation Trilogy, or at least the first book. That
The
started it off.
classic.
Asimov. Isaac
Yeah,
Asimov.
classic.
It's something I read a while ago, but currently I'm rereading it, and I'm like, I had trouble with it back then because it's sort of boring. That's why it's pretty much number 8. And this one won't surprise you. I have to put this one on, even though I think as a book it's pretty bad, but as a story it's awesome. Ready Player One.
Sure.
Hmm.
Okay, I admit the movie I hear wasn't that good,
It's
but
all right.
Yeah. It was all
I
right.
didn't
Yeah.
actually see it. I read the book enough. I liked the story. And the next one's also a movie, but the movie's probably more popular than the book. Starship Troopers. It was one of the.
Sure.
Hmm.
It was like the Foundation trilogy for me. I read it back in high school, and it was pretty good. It was different than the movie.
Yeah, because correct me if I'm wrong, that was more of just like a commentary, and the bug action was a side note compared to the message they were trying to get across. I guess about
Yeah, it wasn't.
society.
It wasn't clearly focused on the bugs. It starts out with a
Sure.
completely different war, and also I got to give it props. It's known as the first EXO. Billy, Bill, sorry. You remember Exo Squad?
Yes. Uh huh.
This is why I got so into this book in high school. It reminded me a lot of Exo Squad, but with a yeah, it had a lot of commentary, social commentary in the original book, but I was a high
Yeah.
schooler. I think that went over my head then, but a
Hmm.
good solid sci-fi book with some good concepts. And well, most of them are new.
Actually, I'm pretty sure that book also inspired some of card stuff.
Oh, I'm sure. I mean,
Yeah.
that was early school sci-fi. I mean, it
Yeah.
even probably inspired another series on this list. Not the next one. My next one, which I didn't number these, but it's number 5. It's Will Save the Galaxy for Food by Ben Yahtzee Croshaw, better known as a game reviewer online. But I love his freaking books, and Will Save the Galaxy for Food is like a down and out star pilot after a star piloting gets obsolete by like a transport system. It's quite interesting. I would recommend it to anyone interested in sort of a satire, funny take on sci-fi. So it's my
It,
number 5 pick.
I think that's my second favorite title in your list so far. My first favorite is
Will Save
Feed.
the Galaxy for Food. He has a sequel to it. It's called Will Destroy the Galaxy for Cash.
That's cute. Yeah.
Yahtzee is just a great writer who isn't a great writer, but he's a great storyteller. That's what I'll say about it. His writing's very basic, but it's very relatable and funny if you're in a certain realm. Next one is something I found out about recently and basically powered through, and I loved it. It was on a lot of lists. It's called Old Man's War. Basically, that's the one that reminded me of Starship Troopers. Basically, the premise is, for anyone who doesn't know about it, uh, on Earth, there's like a recruiters for this international colonization program, but they only recruit 75-year-olds into this program. No one on Earth knows why. They're not out in space. Just this organization takes 75-year-olds and have them in the army, basically. I don't want to spoil it, but they get some really interesting things in this series. It also has the skip drive, which I saw in Outer Worlds recently.
Sure.
I'll talk about that more later if you want to bring it up. Next one, had to include it, The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
definitive book, funny book about sci-fi concepts. And then I'm going to lose a lot of people with the next one. We Are Legion, We Are Bob. It's part of a new series called the Bobiverse series by Dennis E. Taylor. Have you guys ever? You guys know of Halo, right?
Sure. The game.
Yeah. Do
Yeah.
you know the AI in that?
The what are they called? The flood or whatever.
No, the AI programs that sort of are introduced in
Oh,
it.
Cortana and shit.
Yeah, basically they it's not going to be ruining it since after the first chapter you know this. Basically someone dies, a guy who just sold his companies in Vegas for like for like a sci-fi convention in Vegas. He signs up with a cryogenics place, and then by the end of the first chapter, he gets hit by a car. Wakes up like 140 years in the future, and he finds out he's basically our AI. He's been they took his brain, they put it they made it into a computer program of his brain, so he's a computer. And he gets out in space later on.
That's pretty cool.
Quite an interesting concept. And might as well get to my number one. Bill knows what it is.
I think I could take a guess.
Guess, Bill.
I think it's going to be something by Orson Scott Card.
Yeah.
Ender's Game.
Yep.
Yep.
Ender's Game. Although I
Yep.
love Bean, Ender's Game is still definitive. Okay, that awesome series, awesome book. I mean, someone can
Yeah.
argue about all the series after that, but he's sort of pandering after a certain point. After the first four books, anything after that is a toss up if it's good.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like most of the stuff was pretty good, but you're right. It gets a little thin when you get past the first couple. But I feel like a book like that, it's almost like the Foundation series. Just you kind of have to just group them together because it's one big world that you're reading in.
Yeah, Ender's Game can stand alone on its own.
Yeah,
The
yeah,
rests have a little trouble, but not much. Out of the first four, but
yeah, yeah.
then they go back to before the Formic Wars. I have not read any of the Formic War books. Okay,
Uh,
I'm
They're they're actually pretty decent. I
uh,
was surprised. Yeah, yeah.
well, but
They have
yeah,
a little bit of a different feel to them because I think he also has somebody he's writing with. I forget the guy's name at this point. But the books have like a slightly different like feel than like the Ender's Game like saga. But I think it fits in with the world pretty good, and I think it's pretty well written still.
it follows Zap Brannigan. Oh, sorry,
Yeah,
that's
right.
Futurama. Sorry. What was his name? I forget. The guy who trained Ender. Can't remember it right at the top of my head. It's been a while.
Yeah, was it
Zaza.
Rackham, Mazer, or
Mazer
who's?
Rackham.
Hmm.
Okay, thank you. I was struggling to remember that, but
There's you. Which Arthur C. Clarke book did you mention
oh, that was
was on your
actually
list?
the honorable mention.
Oh,
Rendezvous
okay.
with Rama.
Oh, okay. All right.
Okay,
I was gonna say he's got a
it's
lot of.
It's
Arthur C. Clarke's got a lot of stuff.
it's on my list to read. I have not yet, but it sounded really
Childhood's
good.
End.
Okay,
Bill,
Yeah.
I'm
was he
What's
the guy
that?
that did Darwin's Radio?
No, he did Childhood's End.
Okay.
That we read that one as well though.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I
Yeah,
actually
he
just
did.
reread Gods Themselves, which was
Yeah, I was gonna say the Gods Themselves is another one. Yep, yep. That was Asimov though.
yeah.
okay.
It
That
was
that was
actually much better the second time around. I didn't really
Yeah,
care for it the first time, but
yeah,
I
yeah.
read it at the. I had jury duty, and I read it while I was there.
hmm.
Fucking great.
He also wrote. Clark wrote 2001: Space Odyssey too.
Yep,
Ah,
Yeah.
yep. He wrote the movie and novelized it. He even did some sequels, from what I read. But I'm finding older sci-fi writers harder to get into, personally.
Like War H.G. Wells and stuff like that.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
that is almost painful to see their take. You're like, okay, this is cool, it's nice, but a little boring. I'm just a millennial, I guess. I want my action or my thought process challenged right from the start. But
Yeah, I
still,
kind of feel. Yeah, I don't know. I feel kind of like I don't know. George Orwell's another one for me. Like he deserves a place in like the lexicon and even in like the political realm. But man, 1984 was just kind of a flop for me.
yeah,
I'm like I'm reading it and reading it and reading it, and I'm like waiting for something to happen, and then like finally you get a little bit of of actual like story progression, and
sure.
then the ending is just like just kicks you in the nuts, and you're like, man, what the hell,
There's a
yeah,
book I
it's
can't remember the author, Kings of Infinite Space. That was pretty good. Kind of rode the line. I don't like a lot of social commentary in my sci-fi. I know that sci-fi is like uh, there's almost always social commentary, but sometimes it feels a little heavy-handed.
Yeah, yeah, and I feel like that's almost like a subgenre where you have like, you know, that sort of dystopian, sci-fi.
Yeah, I found going researching this, I was looking through other people's picks. There was one guy talking about one book, which I looked into. It was basically a record of Earth, and the way he described it, he basically saying it's a dry thing, talking about these aliens, talking about a planet that sounds very like Earth, and at the end of the five-book series, they put the white man on trial for crimes against humanity. I'm like, really? I hope the book
Sure.
really is not like that. But yeah, social
Is it
commentary
a Q?
is rapid. This was a book written in the 70s, so it's not really related to current politics. But supposedly it was modeled after. Let me not get more into it. It was just a stupid, fun thing I found while researching.
It is an interesting thing too. Do you think a lot of these like newer like dystopian novels and movies, would you count those as like sci-fi or I mean like the Hunger Games and stuff like that?
I think
Hunger
so.
Game, yeah, but I don't think they really deserve a place. Like Hunger Games,
No.
it's very similar
Well,
to the Japanese Battle Royale.
No, I knew you were gonna bring
Of
that up.
course, of
Yeah,
course, a lot
but
of
I mean,
people bring
I'm
up
just
that
talking about like
fact.
those books like or Maze Runner books like are those I guess they're like a subgenre, but like they almost have like formed their own thing with like the like I guess the like dystopian future type of thing. But yeah, I just didn't know whether or not you count those as part of like sci-fi.
Yeah, they're part of sci-fi, just not the sort of sci-fi that I really get into, like Handmaid's Tale. I mean, there is an
Yeah.
element of that in the Bobaverse series. Basically, after he gets out of cryo, he wakes up in the what used to be the U.S. and basically it becomes a theocracy. So 140 years in the future, some crazy Christian takes over, and I could see
Huh.
some commentary there, and it
sure.
sort of creates a dystopian future. Hell, the world gets bombed over. But I did like how they had Brazil as the bad guys. That was an interesting take.
That's different, yeah.
Well, Brazil, in social commentary circles, if you know anything about nations, Brazil is one of the most racist countries there is in the world.
I don't know that.
I think they're the last person to really integrate the population. It's I heard this a long time ago, so I could be wrong, and it could have nothing to do with that. But I found that a fun fact. Brazil was the people who destroyed the earth.
That's not surprising to me. Just honestly, with my experience with in Argentina, not a lot of diversity there. But yeah, I think
Maybe it's
people
maybe it's all the Nazi influence.
probably could be that.
A lot of them did flee to South America and Central
Yeah,
America.
Yeah,
It,
yeah, Brazil. Yeah.
yeah, it
honestly, a
could
lot of
be.
people were so far not. I mean, I feel like we're going out on a tangent of geopolitics at this point. A lot of people forget that in terms of equality and acceptance, America is still pretty far along. I think I just read that like I guess it was shortly after us, but they just made it legal to be gay in India like 2 or 3 years ago. They just outlawed rape in India in 2009.
Yeah.
Yeah, India's bad. China's pretty
I mean, a lot
bad.
of
They're
places
also
are.
major polluters. Also, both India and uh, China have
Yeah, they're just trying to
horrible
feed people.
pollution.
They're
Yeah, I understand the needs for lower technology countries to pump out more because it's easier, it's cheaper to do all this.
the whole point
Well,
I
and
was trying to
plus,
make is we're not the end all and be all of bad guys in the world.
Yeah,
yeah.
China's definitely much worse in my opinion, but I sort of like freedom, freedom of thought, freedom of religion, even though I disagree with most religions.
Probably shouldn't get too political, eh?
But you know what? The act of being apolitical is sometimes seen as being political. I don't
Yes.
understand the logic. I mean, I understand the logic of it. It's basically the sides being like, you have to be on our side or their side, or you're our enemy. What the hell? What if I don't agree with both of you? Then that's its own political stance. What?
Yeah. I mean, I can. In some ways, I can agree with that, but I
In
don't know.
some cases, I agree with that. In other cases, it's like there's so much division in this world. You have to pick between the sides. Plus, America's so there's only two parties really in America. Look at other countries. Plenty of political diversity, right?
It's really a damn shame that we have a two-party system. It should have ended a long time ago.
Agreed. Yeah, it.
Oh, there were years there where we didn't have just a two-party system, and I don't know. It's kind of annoying that it's been boiled down to that.
Yeah, I totally agree. These are, and I feel like that is, you know, uh, I don't think it was by the voters' choice. I feel like it was orchestrated to,
Oh yeah, yeah.
for what reason, I guess just to keep things streamlined, but it does, pigeonhole you into, oh, well, if you're a Republican, you must be, pro life. But there's always a lot of gray. These issues are too important to just have it be binary.
Yeah, but there is a problem with just having one party also. I mean, I think they pretty much bring that up in the foundation books. They almost come down because the guy's predicting that the empire will end in 500 years and they take that all super seriously. I mean, I don't know if you guys read it, but they also do that in Doctor Who, some Doctor Who episodes, the empire. So almighty. There's also Star Trek, they have what's it? The Federation.
Sure.
Okay, it's pretty much just one government system. You can see the flip side of each of those.
I feel like the Federation's a little different though.
Yeah, the Federation is different than these empires because they try to get along. And
Well, plus it's like it's multi-world, whereas like if you're talking about Star Trek, like there's like the Klingon Empire is like is controlled by just the Klingons, where the Federation is like actually like kind of like more like a United Nations.
yeah, I mean, yeah, there is different politics in that. Foundation seems to just have the major empire.
But I don't feel like there are many political issues addressed in Star Trek. Like obviously you have the Prime Directive, but it's not like they're debating over trade routes. You know what I mean?
You mean amongst themselves?
Yeah.
They do
They're
have to settle
actually,
those disputes among other races a lot.
I don't know, because they talk a lot about like, I don't know, at least in Next Generation, like a lot about like signing treaties to join the Federation. And there's actually like 3 or 4 episodes where they like negotiate like stuff like trade routes and stuff like that.
Okay,
So
that's kind of cool then.
Yeah, the
So that it's
wormhole.
almost like it's like the EU at that point.
yeah, yeah.
It's kind of interesting.
Yep. Idealized version of the EU in space.
EU in space.
I mean, for the purposes of like the show or the story, it makes sense because like really, how are you going to extend out into space and things if like you're not a united planet? You know,
Sure. Yeah.
can you imagine like fighting the Borg and then like having like your Earth and war with each other and like
Especially if you're the new kid on the block, hey, we just mastered warp technology and are
yeah.
moderately armed, and then you run across, like you said, the Borg or something without allies, they just be done. You just be done.
Yeah, or if you had still had the like U.S. and Russia or something, you're trying to worry about the Klingons.
Sure.
That would be a serious problem.
The Russians, the North Koreans, and the Klingons. Fuck.
Yeah, 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 right. Yeah,
Kapla,
yeah, right. Good luck, right?
Well, I
Well, yeah,
guess
that
that wraps
devolved
it up.
rather fast, and we got really off topic with that.
But I think that's good. I think that's what we're really selling here.